leg wrestling contest.
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay.
I didn't put my lip gloss on.
Well, again.
Yeah. It feels so good to be back. I'm Craig.
And I'm David.
And we are Shelf Possessed. And we're super excited to be back here for another video. And we are going to kind of rate and review and recap our June TBR in this wrap-up video.
Mm-hmm. I'm excited.
Yeah? Did you like your books this month?
I liked 3 of the 4 that we... I like 3 of the 4 that we read for this month.
Yeah.
One we'll go deep into later on. But what about you?
I did love them. They were very different. They were very kind of across the board genre-wise and style-wise. I thought that they were actually really interesting in tandem with each other. They kind of complemented each other. Mm-hmm. And I actually squeezed an extra book in. And I didn't think I would be able to. So I actually got an extra book for my TBR this month. So,
overachiever.
Yeah. Before we get started, though, we would like to say a giant thank you and a huge, pouring out of our heart to all the people who have subscribed, who have commented, who have liked, who have engaged with us. We are super excited that you're here and that you are following along this journey with us. We love that you're here. We love that we got a bunch of new subscribers, and we just want to say thank you for joining us. And we hope that you'll continue on the journey with us as we go. So let's kind of talk about what we're going to do today. This is our wrap-up. This is our June wrap-up video. We're going to kind of share our overall opinions about what we thought of the books that we read this month and give you our kind of honest thoughts about them. We also wanted to come up with a creative way to rate and review the books that wasn't kind of the standard star system. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of racking our brains. It was like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And this one said,
why don't we do a book report card? Hello?
We're both teachers, so a report
and we both
card.
Books. Yeah.
A report card made sense because this way we can give more in-depth information about what we liked and what we didn't, and then give the book a grade. You'll be able to see our kind of more in-depth thoughts about what the book offers, in our opinion, of course. You may feel differently, but it's our kind of way of showing you what we really thought of the book, without giving it just a generic kind of star rating. So you'll see when we get there, we'll put the book report card up on the screen and kind of explain our criteria before we kind of do the wrap-up. So you'll be able to see kind of what we are thinking and kind of where our main points of interest are as far as the book report go.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
What about the books that we chose?
Our surprise books, yeah. How did you feel about yours?
I was pleasantly surprised with Stephen Rowley's The Editor. Did I love it? No. Okay. But you'll hear more about that later on. What about you?
I loved mine. And I think he knew that going in, that I would probably love it, even though I hadn't finished it beforehand. But when we talk about it, there's just so much to say, and it ties in so much with a lot of the things that we read, and it just moved me a lot. So when we get there, we'll talk about it.
All right.
Yeah. Before we get started, though, if you haven't and you're new here, welcome. We'd want you to like and subscribe. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Like the video. And then we love it when you comment. So comment below. Tell us what you thought of the books that we chose. If you had other Pride Month TBR choices that you were thinking about, just tell us about those below. We'd like to see you and talk to you. So we look forward to kind of engaging more with you in the comments. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. Let's talk about our book report card first.
Okay.
Right? So we're going to put it up on the screen right here so you'll be able to see it. And we'll go through each area as we kind of talk through it. And then you'll see these on the screen as we talk about the books and kind of what their overall grades are as well. So let's flash it up right now. All right, so this is the Shelf-Possessed book report card.
The first one is plot development and pacing. Did the author kind of take us on this journey with them? Did they kind of plan out this whole story for us? Was it easy to follow? Was there any stops and starts along the way? Because if there were, that could probably be a problem. That's why a lot of books get DNF'd very quickly, because they have no idea where the author is trying to take them. And that has happened to me multiple times. So this is one of the most important grading aspects for this report card.
Yeah, pacing to me is like up there at the top for what matters the most when you're reading.
Because I think I started a book last year. I stopped on page 50, and I'm still waiting to get back into it. So yeah.
Our next one is character development, which, second to pacing and plot development is probably how do the characters grow and change over the course of the book. That doesn't mean every character has to change, obviously, but is there good development in the characters? Is it just one, or is it all of them? And does that kind of, go with the arc of the entire book? So that's character development.
Yeah, especially if it's each character kind of starts, and if there's books where the characters are just like this the whole time, it's not going to keep me interested. But if there's some kind of like Rube Goldberg type of situation happening going, then yeah, that's going to keep me interested. The next one is theme and subject matter. This is equally important to the other ones, because if it's a theme or a subject matter that I've heard or read about before, I will probably not be that invested into it unless the author is trying to say something new with the material. That's what I look forward to. So if it's a thriller, okay, well, I've read a lot of thrillers in my time. Did the author change it in some way? Or did he or she kind of follow the same format that other thriller writers did, before? We
didn't on purpose list these in the order of their importance. They just kind of are falling that way. But yeah, if the theme and the subject matter aren't either tied together or made very clear, I think that's a real problem. So the next one is writing style, which again, also super important. Was I able to connect with the writing style? Did the writing style engage me? Did it keep me interested in what was happening? All super important as far as a book goes.
Were there like page-long paragraphs?
Right.
Was there no break? Like no chapters, no chapter headings? Like I think that's all equally important.
Style can be both in voice and in actual like construction of the novel as well. So.
And the last one is reader engagement. And I think, for me anyway, this is the most important thing. If I'm engaged in the story, and I'm there with the author and with these characters, I think that's the most important thing for me, is that I'm engaged. I care about these characters. I care about what happens to them until the very end. And I think that's the most important thing for me. I don't know about you. But.
Yeah, engagement is paramount, essentially. Like, if I'm not engaged in the book, I'm DNFing it for sure.
If I close that book and then I go on whatever website to order the author's other books, I was engaged, really. And I'm going to seek out whatever else that author has written.
Yeah, for sure. So that is our book report card, and that is kind of what we're going to use. That's the criteria that we're going to use to grade the rest of our books that we read every month. So you'll kind of see these on the screen as we go, and we will kind of talk about what grade we give it in each criteria area, and then we will average those to give it an overall grade, and then you'll see the kind of final grade as it flashes up on the screen. So we also should state that this is obviously subjective. Book ratings, book reviews are all subjective. Your opinion may differ greatly from ours, and that's totally fine. We are not here to dictate what you should think about a book, more what we thought about a book instead. So,
have you ever hated a book so much, but then you kind of maybe read it like a few years down the line and was like, okay, I missed something.
Yeah. I've reassessed.
Yeah. Sure. So I always say if you get a chance, read the book twice, let it rest for a couple of years and then go back to it, because you may find something that you liked, or maybe it was something that you just completely hated. It was like, why did I ever like this book?
Yeah. I actually said to him after I read one of my books on my TBR, I was like, I feel kind of silly buying this book now because I'm probably never going to read it again. I enjoyed it, but I don't know that I don't know that I need to read it again. Like, I don't know that my opinion is going to change of this book in like 10 years, you know, or even 2. So, yeah. All right, so we're going to jump right into wrapping up our June Pride Month TBR, and we're going to go one at a time. We'll go back and forth and kind of talk about the books that we liked, and we'll explain our grades. All right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to go first. I'm going to share my first book that I finished, which was Surrender Your Sons by Adam Sass. I enjoyed this book tremendously. I did have some issues with it as far as like style goes and plot and pacing goes, but I did enjoy the reading experience. I didn't put the book down and wanted to, you know, put it away forever. I didn't want to get rid of it. It is about a young boy who is from a small town in Illinois, and he wakes up and finds himself on an island, and it turns out that his mother has sent him to conversion therapy. And then a lot of things happen on the island. There is a lot of... I will say that there are some trigger warnings in here for some elements that you probably should be looking out for. Before you read it, though, the author does a really nice job of telling you kind of what to expect in the author's note in the front. So he does kind of go through why he wrote it and what you're about to kind of see. So that's a good thing to be mindful for before you read the book. So, all right, so I'm going to put up my report card right now. So you can see the plot development and pacing I give a 90 out of 100. I thought it did a pretty good job. There were some kind of hiccups throughout the book, but for the most part, pretty good. The character development was also 90. I enjoyed the characters. There were things I wanted to know more about them, so that's why I gave it a 90. As far as theme and subject matter, I thought that was probably the strongest element that came out of the book, that like this idea was really interesting and it was executed well, so I gave that a 95 out of 100. The writing style was where I had the most problems. It does follow a typical kind of thriller format. There are cliffhangers, there are things that keep you engaged and interested and wanting to go on, but there were times where some things kind of were more elongated than I thought that they should have been, and there were times where the voice was a little bit youthful. But I should say it's also a YA book. I'm an adult, so I know that I am not necessarily the intended audience. Mm-hmm. So I did give that an 80 out of 100. And then engagement, I gave it an 85. I was engaged for almost the entire book. There were a couple of times where I put it down and didn't pick it up for about 3 or 4 days. And I read something else instead, so that's why it's an 85. So that gives it an overall score of 88 out of 100, which is the grade of a B. So Surrender Your Sons by Adam Sass, B for me.
Okay. So my first book of June was Brontez Purnell's 100 Boyfriends. Fantastic, outstanding, all of those things. It is a short story collection that deals with queer sexuality unapologetically, which I found a breath of fresh air in reading it. What I liked about it, it's a short story collection, so there's not really a lot of character development to talk about, but I thought that each person that each chapter was kind of dedicated to, there was a sense of these people were real. So there was a realness about each character, and you were kind of there with them the whole time. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. It's also probably why I liked it so much, because it's probably going to bother some people, but I just thought it was a fantastic read. So the pacing was great. The chapters are short, so you can get through a couple of them before you go to bed or before you wake up, or when you wake up first thing in the morning, you can kind of attack those chapters. It's really great. The theme and subject matter, like I said before, it just deals with queer sexuality in a way that I have not seen before in fiction, in short stories. And I think Purnell was just great at kind of sussing out that stuff in this book. Writing style also fantastic. And with my engagement, I was engaged the whole time. This is a book that I know I'm going to go back to every now and then throughout the years, because it's just that good. It's just that good. So, yeah, I'm excited. I want him to read it because I think I need someone to talk to about this.
Well, it's funny because I purchased that book for myself and then did not read it.
And then I snagged it up.
Yeah. So your final grade was?
It was 100 out of 100.
Yeah.
I was there, like, I read it in, like, 2 days, and immediately I was stalking Brontez Purnell online. Immediately. Because it's just, it's queer, it's punk, it's everything that I just kind of enjoy reading. And I loved it.
That's great. That's what we want.
That's it. That's all I got.
My next book was The Housewives, the real story behind the Real Housewives. I have to say we have been binging right now The Real Housewives of Dallas. So this is especially prescient given the fact that we're watching at least 3 different franchises at the same time. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed this book. It is obviously a behind-the-scenes look at what goes on in creating and the history of The Real Housewives and kind of what is happening behind the scenes with the women themselves, with production, with creation of the show. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the book, and I really enjoyed it and found it really, really engaging. I actually even got to chat with Brian Moylan a little bit on Instagram, which was kind of nice about the book. So I'm going to flash up my report card. This is a nonfiction book, so this was a little bit harder as far as our criteria go. But as far as plot development and pacing, the pacing was great. The chapters were a little long for my personal taste, but they did move and they did keep you engaged in what was happening. So I gave that a 90 out of 100. There are no characters, as it were, in the book, but, well but the people that he talks about and the interviews that he does and the way he uses his own voice was really, really engaging. So I gave that a 95. As far as theme and subject matter, obviously, it's about the Real Housewives. We love the Real Housewives. I wanted to read this book, so I gave it a 90 out of 100. And the only reason I did that was, I would say the first 3/4 of the book are super, super engaging as far as the content goes. But once you get to the last 3 or 4 chapters, which are less behind the scenes and more about the fans and more about the writer's experiences with some of these women, it's a little bit less interesting to me. I felt like the first 3 quarters of the book were really, really interesting, and then the last 1/4 of the book was a little bit lackluster as far as I wanted it to be, at least. Mm-hmm. I gave it 100 out of 100 for writing style. Brian Moylan's voice is distinct and wonderful and snarky and sassy. It was perfect. If you've read his recaps, you are fully prepped to go into these books because his writing style is like top notch. And then engagement, I gave it a 95 because I did not put the book down. I did not take a break. I kept reading. So I got through this book pretty fast. So I give it a 95. That gives it a score of 94 out of 100, which gives it an A for me. So that is The Housewives, the real story behind the Real Housewives by Brian Moylan. My grade, A.
My next book this month was Swimming in the Dark. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I have a lot of love for this book, but there's certain elements that just did not get me connected to the material in a way. It's a beautiful love story. It's about 2 young men who kind of fall in love at this camp. And then once that camp is over, they kind of go back to their own lives. But there's also this political strife that is going on where the two young men are kind of separated on 2 camps. Okay. And it's them just trying to find spaces and gaps to kind of fulfill that love that they found at camp. Okay. So let me bring up my report card. So plot development and pacing, I gave a 90. It was not a book that you can kind of race through because of the subject matter. And I've told Craig this before, but sometimes in books, when they go back and forth in time, it's not one of my favorite things in books. And this book kind of does that. But it wasn't that annoying to me anyway. Okay. But that pacing, it kind of made me stop and start several times. So it took me a lot longer to read than, let's say, Brontez Purnell's book. Okay. Character development, I gave 100. I thought these were 2 kind of queer characters that I've never seen or I've never read about in books before. And so I thought that was really intriguing and really fascinating. Theme and subject matter I gave it a 90. It almost has that feeling of a queer kind of Romeo and Juliet. These two people love each other, but life outside of that love is kind of pulling them apart, right? Writing style, I thought, was just beautiful, poetic language, which also made the pacing a little bit hard to get through. Okay. And as far as the engagement, it was about an 85 out of 100 for me. Like I said before, I want to kind of get through this book. I don't want to put it down. That's the goal when I'm reading a book. The goal is for me not to put down this book. That I want to keep reading. I want to stay up until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning trying to finish this. And this book, I had to stop and start several times. So my final grade for Swimming in the Dark is a 93 out of 100.
Which is
an A minus. An A minus. I hate giving A minuses. But also, I was trying to be very low key because he has not read it yet. He probably will not read it, but I'm going to keep encouraging him to read kind of like these historical fiction books. But overall, I thought it was a beautiful book. It was just kind of it took a couple of Long Island iced teas to get through.
It always worries me a little bit when you talk about how a book is hard to get through, because if you, who are more familiar with that writing style and that kind of genre of historical fiction, have a hard time, I'm like, I'm going to have the worst time.
There was beautiful moments in the book that the writer kind of paints for the reader that you want to stay in that environment.
Yeah.
Because there's a moment in the book where they kind of find this kind of clearing and there's like a lake and they kind of spend like the weekend there together. And I'm like, I want to stay there because I know once they leave, life is going to hit them very hard once they get back to the real world. But I wanted them to stay there.
Yeah.
But, I didn't write it.
All right, I'm going to do 2 in a row because I was a little nasty little overachiever this month. I did finish my TBR the other day, slightly earlier than I had intended, and had another book ready for July. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pick it up and read it. And then I finished it in a day. Like literally in 24 hours, I finished the book. So that is Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. You probably saw this video in our book haul when we went shopping, and I was excited to read it. I was super excited to read it, but it has no place in this TBR at all by any means. It is not related to queer material. It doesn't relate to any of these other queer books that we read, but I picked it up and read it anyway, so I thought I would just throw it in. I loved it. Finished it really fast. There were some things that I didn't love, but for the most part, it was a great book. It moved really fast, and obviously I read it super fast. So my grades for Whisper Down the Lane are, for plot development and pacing, it is a 90 out of 100. This book is about a young man and a lie that he tells when he was a child, and how that lie kind of affects his adult life in more violent and scary ways. So the plot moves super fast, and you get through a lot of material really quickly. It does move back and forth between time periods, so it does go from the 80s to the 2000s. So you may not love that as much, but I liked it a lot. Character development was a 90 out of 100. I liked the characters for the most part. I even though one of them is a liar, I thought it was a really interesting concept. There were some plot and character things that I was able to predict, that I was able to figure out before the book hands it to me, which I don't always love. Sometimes I like being right. Sometimes I like being able to figure out what's going on. But if a book can surprise me, that's when I think it's the most successful. So theme and subject matter was a 95 out of 100. I really enjoyed diving into the satanic panic thing of the 80s and kind of its reverberation into now a little bit. Like the idea of that is really interesting. And so I thought it was a really interesting way to look at this subject matter and this character. The writing style was 85. There were a lot of different uses of writing style. So there's interviews. There are the switching back and forth between two different characters, you think. So there were some things in there that I didn't love. So that's why I gave it an 85. And then I give it a 90 for engagement because I was engaged. I finished it super fast. And that gives it an overall score of a 90 out of 100, which is an A-. So Whisper Down the Lane, Clay McLeod Chapman, A- for me. If you love horror and thrillers, I would say it's not as horror-y as I thought it would be, given the cover. It isn't gruesome necessarily. There's some slightly gruesome things, especially with animals. So like if you have a problem with that, like that's, but like I would say for the most part it's not super horrific by any means. It is thrilling and kind of interesting to kind of see. There is some stuff with some child abuse that you probably should be wary of if you're going to read the book, but it's not touched on for a super amount of time. But I really enjoyed Whisper Down the Lane by Clay McLeod Chapman. So next we are going to do our surprise books. And I think we were both pleasantly surprised by the others' choices. I'm going to talk about mine first, and then I'll have you talk about the editor. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah? So my surprise pick was The Inheritance by Matthew Lopez, which is a play. I loved this. It is...
I knew it.
Yeah. It is intensely sad. And there are very many moments that kind of left me wanting to put the book down because I was so emotional. But ultimately, the ending is very uplifting and hopeful in a way. And I really loved that. I really loved kind of what the book is saying about gay culture, especially gay culture now versus gay culture in the 80s. I thought this play is brilliant and belongs up there with The Normal Heart and Angels in America as far as great American plays about the gay experience. Okay, I don't want to tell you too much because I don't want to ruin it for you, but this is a play about a group of men and kind of their dalliance with each other, but two specific men and how their kind of violent parting of ways and the new characters and the new partners and the new people that they meet affect their lives. And it's all about looking backwards. And it's about, as he said in the reveal, it's about legacy, and it's about where we leave our marks as gay people and who we help and who we lift up and what stories are important to be told. So that's The Inheritance, and I absolutely loved it. As far as a grading goes, 95 out of 100 for plot development and pacing. It moves so nicely. There are some scenes that read almost like you're reading like you're watching a movie. It's brilliant that way. 100 out of 100 in character development. I loved these people even when I didn't love them. I loved them. 100 out of 100 for theme and subject matter. All gay people should be required to read this play, along with A Normal Heart and along with Angels in America. This is a play that should be read by all gay people. I gave it a 95 out of 100 for writing style. There were some moments in there that felt a little clunky, but for the most part, the writing was great. And then 95 out of 100 for engagement, because I was engaged the majority of the time. There was rarely a time I wanted to put it down. That means The Inheritance by Matthew Lopez gets a 97 out of 100, which is an A from me. So, great choice. You did good.
I know.
You did very good. All right, now you're going to let me have it, right?
Yes and no. Yes and no.
All right. Let's hear it.
So Craig gifted me Stephen Rowley's The Editor. A lot of you are reading his new book, The Guncle, but didn't get that one. I got The Editor. Let me start off by saying I did not hate this book. I love this book. But I think I wanted to edit it. There are moments where I was like, they could have cut this out. They could have cut this out. Let's get to the action faster. Which brings, my plot development and pacing grade is a 75 out of 100 because I think we could have gotten more to the story faster. Character development was about 85 for me. When you have this picture, it's almost a little deceiving. And it's called The Editor, and you find out that this main character, his editor, is going to be, of course, Jackie Onassis is going to be editing his book. You want to see her. I missed her when she was not in certain scenes. I kept wanting to go back and reread her stuff or her chapters. Theme and subject matter, a 90. The main character is dealing with, he's written this kind of fictional story that may be or may not be about his own mother, and that's creating strife in their family. And Jackie Onassis sort of becomes a bridge between the main character and his mother, which I thought was very poignant and kind of beautiful. So both theme and subject matter, 90, writing style, 90, engagement, 85. Like I said before, anytime Jackie O was not in the chapter, it kind of took me out a bit. And I've told Craig before, if a main character resorts to a lot of self-sabotage in a story, it takes me out of it a bit. Or if they kind of contradict themselves. And I found the main character kind of doing that throughout this book. So, but overall, I gave it an 85 out of 100. It was not bad. It was not bad. I still recommend it. If you love The Guncle, I'm sure you're going to love The Editor. But you're going to want more of Jackie O in the book. So, he lists a few books that kind of inspired him while he was writing this. So, Reading Jackie, Her Autobiography and Books by William Kuhn. Jackie as Editor, The Literary Life of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis by Greg Lawrence. Like, after I read that book and then I read those and I saw that those were the books that he used while he was reading this, I wanted to go and buy those books as well. So, I'm kind of glad that he did that. So, once again, I mean, overall, B+ for me. I would go back and read it again, but I also, I want him to read it too, because actually you bought this for yourself.
I did buy it for myself, yes. Because I intended to buy The Guncle, and I was like, well, I wanted to know what his writing style was like before I bought that, and so I bought that because everyone was talking about that last year, so I thought I'd read that one. So,
So I think a good mix of books this month. We finished them, which I was a little worried about that we weren't going to finish them, but overall, just good stuff.
Yep. Okay, we have one more book to talk about. We saved this one for last because we both read it, and we both have very strong opinions about this book, and that is Yes, Daddy by Jonathan Parks Ramage. We don't have a copy of it anymore because we returned it to the library, so we'll put it up between us while we're talking about it until you see the report card. So we wanted to kind of dive deep into this book a little bit because we did both read it and we both felt very strongly about it. And surprisingly in the same way, I think. We both had, our initial predictions were wrong about how we were going to feel about it. So we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about this book because it has been all over the Instagram and BookTube, and we've been hearing people talk about it, so we wanted to kind of offer some discourse on it as well. So,
and we were intrigued by the hype.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of those books that we were like, okay, well, everybody's talking about it, so we should get it. And then there was so much love around it, so it was like, okay, well, this is something that we should probably have or probably read. We did not feel that way.
I was even on Instagram the other day looking at it, and people, as Pride Month is kind of wrapping up, people are really, really talking about this book, and I saw at least 4 different 5-star reviews of this book, and I have reached out to multiple people and asked them why. I did not feel that strongly about the book as far as like its rating. So we're going to kind of volley back and forth here, and we'll talk about the things that we'll talk about things we liked first, and then we'll kind of go into the stuff that we didn't like as much, and then we'll kind of go through the report card a little bit. So the one thing about this book that I liked personally the most was probably the first half of it. I thought, given the description that we were given, I thought the first half kind of lived up to that, and was a page turner and was thrilling and was engaging, and the book just kind of lost me after that first half. So, but I did like that first half quite a bit. What about you?
When you said that someone said it was like a gay Get Out, I think that made me extremely cautious. So going into the book, that's where my kind of expectations were. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be a great thriller. We don't get a lot of queer thrillers. So I kind of went in there with very high hopes, and it was nothing like that. I was expecting this big, you look at the cover and I think, oh, this is going to be a horror novel of some kind. It's going to be like, maybe, I wouldn't call it a gay Get Out. No, absolutely not. I thought it was going to be a gay, like, Stepford Wives. Mm-hmm. That's what I was hoping. That's the book that I want to read. Right?
Well, then you got to write that book.
Yeah, it was a time. But that's what I was expecting. And then you kind of get to that second half, and it's like...
It's a different book.
Did I pick up the same book?
Yeah.
And I think that's where I went. So I don't think it wasn't a horrible book. I've read horrible books in my life. I don't think it was necessarily horrible. But there was just a lot of things that I think the author could have unpacked more.
Yeah.
And kind of maybe color in some more details with certain stuff.
I'm in total agreement about the multiple books. I said to him, I think that this is 3 books right now. I think that you have the first half being 1 book, and then there are multiple other stories in the second half, which is a problem for me. Mm-hmm. I also feel like, and I said this to someone on Instagram, I said, this book was sold to me under false pretenses. Like, you tried to sell it to me as one thing, and it wasn't that thing. Now, if you would have told me what I was getting into before I read the book, I might have been more willing to accept that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't get that. You get that in the first half, and I think the second half is really where it falls apart. I also should say this book deals really heavily with sexual assault. It deals really heavily with conversion therapy. It deals with a lot of family relationships, which is why we said, of course, there are 3 books in one here. So if that scares you, or if that's not something that you want to read about, I would avoid this book for sure, because it's very graphic. And that part was really tough to read, and there are times when I was reading it where it didn't feel like, I don't know, it felt like glorified in some ways, which I didn't love. It made me feel uncomfortable. And maybe that was the intention, and I just didn't understand that, but it did make me feel uncomfortable. Let's talk about our report card for the book. Okay. It's obvious that we both didn't like it, or didn't like elements of it, at least, and don't really understand what the hype is, I think. So, and I think our report card kind of reflects that on the book. So, all right. First one, plot development pacing. We both agreed 75 out of 100, a solid C.
And I think once you get to that second half of the book, it's almost like I felt like I hit a wall with it, and I was like, oh, we're changing drivers. That's what it kind of felt like, in a way, for me anyway.
I did get through the book really fast. I think I read it in less than a day. So the pacing itself, I thought, especially for that first half, really, really works. But like he said, the second half, it just, when the story diverges into something else, and then it diverges again into something else, and then things don't get fully explored, it just kind of, it threw me really, really hard. And I even remember saying, because I think you were teaching when I was reading it, and I said, what is happening in this book? I said, where is this going? And I had no idea, I couldn't necessarily predict where it ended up, but that wasn't a good thing in this case.
So for character development, we gave an 80 out of 100. I think at the beginning of it, he was just someone I didn't really like.
Yeah.
Really. And then it wasn't until these bad things started to happen, I was like, oh, okay, well now I kind of have this kind of fatherly type... Get it?
Yeah.
I kind of have this fatherly thing for him where you want to kind of protect him. But...
I don't feel like you need to have characters that are insanely likable all the time. I have read multiple books where the characters aren't likable, but this main character was really, from the jump, not likable. And then these terrible things happened to him, and it felt like, as a reader, those terrible things were supposed to make me like him because he has suffered, and that did the opposite for me. It's not that I hated him because of it, but I just didn't like him before, so I didn't understand why I was suddenly supposed to like him because of his trauma, and that bothered me. Again, I think that the tertiary characters are much more interesting than your protagonist, for sure. Yeah. The next one is theme and subject matter. This is our second to lowest grade here, just because there was a really interesting idea to explore, especially in that first half, and it gets explored and then it moves on to something else. And I don't think that first story gets resolved at all by any means. And I think the subject matter is a little bit paper thin in some ways. And I think that the advertising campaign and the way that people are talking about the book is selling it as this sex thriller, and it's not that.
No.
At all. And in fact, if that's what you're going in for, I think you would be disappointed by that. So that's why we gave it a 70 out of 100 for theme and subject matter.
Mm-hmm. And the writing style as well, I think, like I said before, it just the rhythm and the patterns kind of change once you get over that first hump of the book. And I think that's initially what took me out of it. But also the way that, people have blurbed about it, people have spoken about it. I have questions, not just for the writer, but for the editors and the people that kind of publicize this book, because that cover was very misleading, and I know it was misleading for a lot of people. But yeah, so we gave the writing style 80 out of 100.
The last one was engagement, and that one we gave a 65 out of 100, our lowest score. And I could argue that, yes, I was engaged for a part of the book, but then the book lost me, and that's where I did finish it. Obviously, I didn't DNF it, but I did finish it. But I just did not understand why it was going the directions it was going, and that's a personal thing for me, but you also felt the same way. And I've talked to a few other friends who also felt that way as well. I'm curious, though, if you've read Yes, Daddy, and you did like it, comment below and tell us why. Tell us what was it about that book that made you like it.
Because when I was looking at some of the reviews, it was like, oh, this is a 5-star book. And I'm like, why? And then I'm looking at some of the reviews, and they don't really give you their own opinion about it. So it makes me question, did they read the book or something else? I don't know.
Yeah.
But because I didn't get that from reading the book, and the way that it's hyped, I have questions. It's a polarizing book, and I can understand why people like it, but I can also understand why people just dislike it so much. But and I think those kinds of books are important, because Yes, Daddy would be a great book club book, especially if your book club varies in ages and generations and sexualities and ethnic groups. I think this is a book that deserves to have that conversation about those specific themes. But I think those need to be had.
Yeah. I would be interested. I mean, I think that it's a book that warrants discussion. It's a book that warrants people's opinions, however they may be on the book, to be shared together. I felt like I was reading it in a vacuum because of so many people posting about how much they loved it. And I just felt like, the cheese that stands alone, because I didn't understand. I didn't know why. And I'm still kind of out in the dark as to why. I've asked several people, and they haven't really been able to articulate to me why they loved it. My personal opinion is I think that maybe it's because books like this, it's like a desert for books like this. We don't get these very often. We don't get gay thrillers like this very often. And I think that because as queer people, we are kind of starved for this kind of content, that when one comes along, we have to like hold it up like Simba and the Lion King, and and praise it for all that we can. And I don't think that we should be. I think we should be more discerning with what we're praising. And
I'll tell you what I've kind of loved with these books, Yes, Daddy included, is that there are a variety of queer books out there now. I don't remember growing up and having my own kind of queer YA section in a library or in a bookstore, and to see that now, we've been to a couple of local bookstores and we see that, and it's great. And we want more of it, because I want queer books that don't deal with queer trauma exclusively. Our final grade for it was an average of 74 out of 100, which is a C. So, that feels normal. If I was going to give it a star rating, I would give it a 2 or 3 stars. So I think a C fits.
That's our June wrap up. Those are the 8 books that we read collectively this June. I'm going to throw up on the screen really quickly just kind of our breakdown. So we had the lowest grade this month being Yes Daddy at a C, and the highest grade being 100 Boyfriends at an A+. And you can kind of see the grades on the screen there and how we ended up kind of rating everything. So I'll also share our grades for these books in the description box below. So if you're curious kind of what those are, they'll be down below as well. So 8 books in a month. That's pretty impressive, you know. And we got through all of them. We didn't DNF anything. We didn't, put anything down. Nope. We got through all of them, which is great. Also, if you want to see photos of these books and more detailed looks at our report cards, you can head to our Instagram
at @shelf_possessed.
This one does a really nice job of posting stories, frequently posting photos of our books. We just did our top 6 of 2021, and the photos turned out amazing. So he's doing a really nice job over there. So check us out on Instagram. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to us, follow us along, comment below. We want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. So we hope that you'll join us and you'll see us literally in one day for our July TBR video, because we're going to post this at the end of June and the July TBR at the beginning of July. So you'll get 2 videos pretty much back to back. So we'll see you very, very soon. It's been fun. We hope you enjoyed this. Come back and we'll see you in the next video.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.